and welcome to Jessie James Beads. How are you, my friends, today on this beadiest of Thursdays? I hope that you're having a lovely day and that all things have been going swimmingly for you. So over here in the UK, we've actually had some lovely sunshine, which has made my asthma really bad. So if I'm a bit croaky tonight, huge apologies on that front. I'm going to show you a quick flash of the beads that we're going to be using tonight. This is the Beach Chic strand. Let's just tip them out because why wouldn't I? There we go. So there's some beautiful metallics, some gorgeous glass facets. We've got crystal cages in there as well as your spacer beads. We've got these gorgeous milky, almost opal-like beads as well. It's a gorgeous collection. I've got to say though, amongst my favourite on this strand are these little babies. Absolutely gorgeous. Shakisha's joined us. Hello, darling. How are you? Big hugs to you down in Florida, I want to say. Now, I've made a little pendant for you today with 18 gauge and 26 gauge wire. And I hope that you will enjoy having a look at what we're going to make together today. So we have got some bead caps on this strand as well. It's a glorious strand. Very much one of my kind of flavours, my colour profiles. These are gorgeous. I think actually I will make today's pendant with this piece, which is a beautiful faceted round, huge facets on that, and a glorious coating of the surface. Hazel and Marie and Margaret and Cherie have joined us. Hello to you, my darlings. How are you all today? I think I might also reserve one of these slightly smaller facets in a similar colour. It's almost like an imperial topaz colour. Debbie's joined us from Georgia. Hello to you. Celia's in from Bolton in Lancashire. Tamara's coming in and saying howdy, and Anne has joined us as ever from sunny California. So the strand we're looking at today is your Beach Chic strand. It's relatively new into Jessie James Beads, and there we go. Shakisha's corrected me. I'm amazing now that I've caught you live. I'm in Kansas, the land of Oz. Many apologies. For some reason I had you pegged as down in Florida. Mind you, my memory is a little bit on the faily side. Stephanie's joining us from Missouri. How are you, my darling? So there's your strand, the beautiful Beach Chic strand. I'm going to pop these out of the way for now, but I'll show you them again at the end of today's video so that you can see what the remaining beads for that collection are. I wish, says Shakisha. Melanie says, hello, my lovely. Hello to you too, darling. Margaret says, hi, Anne. And Angel is also joining us from Idaho. Hello, sweetheart. Heather's in from Alan in Texas. And Melanie says, you were thinking of me in Florida. We've got a lovely contingency of beautiful souls down in Florida. Hello. If we've not met before, brain, mouth, brain. Not quite sure what's going on there. My name is Jem. I live in the United Kingdom where I was born, where I work, and I create jewellery with wire, beads, gemstones, all sorts. I even make really ridiculous crowns from time to time as well, just because it's so much fun. It's lovely to have your company today here on this Jessie James Beads channel, and we're going to be working with Beach Chic. I'm going to add in some 18 gauge and 26 gauge round wires. Those are my absolutely go-to wires. If I could only have 2 gauges, those would be them. Let's pop back down to the board, have a look at that strand again, and let's get moving with our tutorial for today. So Amy is in from Chantilly in Virginia. Hello, my beady friends. Beautiful necklace and blouse. Thank you, Anne. That's very kind of you. And Margaret says, hello, hope you are well, Anne. Lovely. I do enjoy our beady friendships across the world. So this is the piece that we're going to make today. Now, it's quite fanciful. However, I'm going to show you a piece of jewellery later, if I can get it off my bust without dropping everything on the floor, which, because it's me, is fairly unlikely. And it's made with not the same, but something of a similar design. And it's repeated over and over. Now, as a pendant, this is quite pretty. But you could repeat the design with all the different beads from this Beach Chic collection, add them onto a necklace, and you'd have something really quite exquisite and special. So this is the name of the strand. I'll just leave that up in the corner, and I've decided that we're going to work with something a little bit different to what we have here. We could use bead caps. Let me just grab those out of the box. There's the one. Let me see if I can find that other one. Oh my gosh, it's gone on a little journey somewhere. I don't know where it's gone. Here we are. Let's have a look at that. We can repeat a similar design, but in a slightly different flavour. Robin Rose is in, and Margaret says, looking good in purple gem. Thank you very much. So we are going to start working today with that 18 gauge wire. Now I've cut a length of 18 inches. And at the moment it's just looking a little bit sad like this. So what I'm going to do is grab hold of one end of that wire and really warm through all the way along that strand. So if I go a little bit by a little bit, because then you can see everything that's happening. I'm just running once or twice over each section of the wire so that the whole length of that wire is now nice and toasty, a little bit smoother and a little bit more flexible. What I want to do is to be able to keep all of this wire on screen so you can see how we get through this. Now the reason I warm that wire up before I just start rotating it around is because if I warm it first, it means that I'm not putting any jagged angles into the wire, and then when I want to use it later, it's going to be a little bit softer, smoother and ready to work. So I've just left a tail of about, let's go with about 6 inches, and that's where we're going to start working. But I've just circled around the rest of that wire, warming it first, and just going to make sure that you can then keep an eye on it, and hopefully we won't knock absolutely everything flying. What I might do is just pop these beads into a box so that if I do knock into them, it's not the most dramatic situation in the world. There we go. They can just stay in there and be a little bit safer for now. So we're going to start with a mini spiral. At the beginning of our design, I tend to work from the centre outwards. If I've pronounced your name incorrectly, I'm very, very sorry, but Denise Schreiber has joined us and is new here. Hello to you. It's good to have your company. Thank you. Cherie says those earrings are quite pretty. You could make them as earrings. You can make them as a pendant. You could repeat the design over and over. There's plenty of beads to choose from in this luxurious design strand. Could you snuggle a bead into the centre gem? I would say you could absolutely get a 2.5 to 3 millimetre bead in there. I have got a smaller facet, but I think it's a 4mm. What you could do if you wanted to is wire that over the surface of the centre, or make your centre spiral a little bit larger, and then you absolutely can add that in. So there's an idea from Cherie for you all. You could also go to a different pot. I tend to have a pot of half-used beads on my desk at all times. These are teeny tiny, 2.5mm. You could add one of those in if you wanted to. So let's get started. Basic toolkits today. I'm going to be using my flush cutters, round nose pliers. I may add in a second set of those chain nose pliers, as well as my standard bent chain nose pliers. If you have them, always good to have your bail makers. If you don't have them, then a pencil or a pen. Even the handle of your pliers will be helpful. Jennifer's joined us from Columbus in Ohio. Welcome to you, sweet pea. So let's give that a smooth and a warm again, just to make sure that's super fluid. And we're going to begin by creating that circular form. I just pop that up to the top. That's the bit that we're working on right now. So I've made sure that there's a nice flush end to my wire to begin with. If you have the jagged end, just give that a quick trim. Adding that level of detail to your jewellery will elevate it from a hobbyist to a jewellery maker. So I'm going to rotate those pliers around until I get a nice round form. If you wanted to follow Cherie's advice and pop a bead in there, do consider the size of the aperture that you will need to leave. So what I want to do now is grab hold of that central section and pull the wire away at quite a strong angle. So there's a bit of a hook there. I'm not worried about that because I'm not setting a bead, but if I did want to set a bead, I'd need to make sure that that circular form in the centre was completely closed up. What I will do is give that a bit of a squish, and I'm just opening and closing the pliers on that central section. just to make sure that it's nice and strong. Now this could be a flower, it could be a sun. It's a lovely spiral based design. So what we're going to do is work around from that first point. A lot of what I do is very, very basic, and what I'm hoping to do is just teach you the little refinements that you can yourself make to make this kind of design a little easier. So I'm going to support the first little section of wire that comes away, and I'm going to put a very gentle little angle in. So I've just rested the pliers in on this first half, and I've allowed the second half to just be a little bit more soft and gentle. If I take this point to this point as measurement, I'm going to repeat that measurement. So the little kink that we put in the wire is about half the way along before I bring that wire strongly back towards our start point. Now you might see that my start point is a little bit elevated at the moment. So I'm just going to take a second to get that nice and flat. Doesn't really matter if it is a bit elevated, but it will be easier for you to see if I deal with it now. Robin says, what needle nose pliers are you using? They look like they have a nice small tip. So these are my almost 12 years old now bent chain nose pliers. Chain nose because they taper and they are flat. You could just as easily use my Beadalon chain nose pliers. They have a lovely taper to them. Now, I have no clue who the manufacturer is. I've had these so long that the label has worn off. But any tapered chain nose pliers, especially bent chain nose pliers, will work with you. Cole has joined us from upstate New York. Welcome to you. So you can see we've got a small angle about halfway up this little protrusion that we're creating. Kim is in. Hello, no worries, my little butterfly. So I'm going to try and create a little bend in this next section of wire, equal and opposite to the first bend. So what I'm attempting to do here is to either create whichever style you like. It could be a petal, it could be a sun ray. So this is quite soft in its angles. I'm making this one a little bit firmer because it's easier for you to see what's happening if I do. Lynn has joined us from Louisiana. Beautiful warm day in Louisiana. It's been relatively warm here, to be honest, which is nice at this time of year. It's always a bit of a question whether or not it's going to be lovely. So in order for me to have space between each of these little petals or sun rays, I use my round nose pliers as the wire crosses over that centre point. I'm going to pop the tip, the very, very end of the pliers in, just before where it crosses over the circular form. And I'm going to draw the wire strongly back away. Now whilst I do that, it goes a little bit blurry because I lift it away, but if I drop that back down it should be in nice, fine, crisp focus. MC has joined us from Texas. Welcome to you, my lovely. Paul is coming in from Willow in Alaska, where it's finally spring. What's the temperature check in Willow today, darling? The last time we spoke it was minuses. So hopefully things are beginning to warm up for you. Now, one of the reasons I love to teach jewellery to people who may not have had much wire experience is because it's actually really simple to make a design like this. All we're going to do is repeat these petals over and over again. You may find as you go through that you want to just move the location of that central circular form. It's all achievable. Okay, so we're just repeating the same process now. What I will do, because I don't want you to get bored of me, is just repeat this a couple of times, and I won't go for quite as many times as I've jammed in on the display piece. But I'll take a photograph and pop that down into the comments of this video later, and you'll be able to see then what the difference between the two kind of styles is. So I'm just going to repeat quite quickly through, but I will talk it through as I go. So halfway along that wire I'm putting an angle in. If you want to, you can draw a line on your page and use that to make sure that you continually get the same distance. I'm going to eyeball it. I think this one might be slightly larger, but I'm not actually going to cry about it. I'm not going to worry. If you needed to shorten that slightly, you can indeed just open it back out and just move that along ever so gently. We're going to put an angle on the return journey as well. The reason that I'm using round nose instead of chain nose pliers at this next juncture is because it gives us this lovely swooping arc just going around that central point. If you prefer, or if you find it easier to follow, you can use your chain nose pliers to generate that shape. So I'm just going to open this out slightly because, like I said, I'm going for fewer of these petals or protrusions than I have on my display piece. But all you'd need to do is keep them narrower and closer together if you preferred this aesthetic. Paula says it's 31 this morning, but it's now up to 40. That's over freezing, right? 32 is freezing, isn't it? Yeah, so you're getting there. Spring is springing. Sarah's joined us, chiming in for a hot minute. Enjoy the class with Jem. She's the best. No, Sarah, you're the best. So thanks for popping in. I know you're super busy with everything going on at the moment. So again, I'm going to support the wire as it comes away from that centre point, pop a little angle in, and again I will say you could use some kind of mark on your desk or a sheet of paper to make sure that you're getting that same distance if you prefer. You can play around with the angles slightly. I'm just going to draw that slightly closer in before I pop those pliers back in halfway down and draw the wire back towards the centre. Now you might want to open these out slightly, you might want to close them up slightly. Cannot wait for what this beady babe has in store for us at summer camp. I can't wait to share it with you either. Oh, I've got new photos to send you. Remind me and I'll send some photos. Are you around at the weekend, Sarah? If you are, let's chat. Let's pop those pliers in again and draw the wire away. If you find that you're making this section too tight, you can use your round nose pliers, as I showed you on the first angle, to just open it out a bit. It's just slightly easier with those round nose pliers to achieve that gap between the petals or the sun rays. So again, we've got a little angle going out and then we return back. Maria has joined us. Hello, Jem, Sarah and fellow JJBers. What a wonderful way to start my day here in Buena Park, California, watching you on the TV. Oh my gosh. Big screen. Yeah, oh, well, I'm too shy. I won't come back to the main screen now. I'll hide. You'll see me wrinkles, love. Denise says we had 23 degrees here at 5 a.m. Just had to kick the heat in for sure. I'm not surprised. That does sound a little bit on the chilly side. So again, I would say you can close these up or you can open them out, depending on what you want to achieve from this design. It's really flexible. So bring that wire back towards the centre, and you can see I'm continually aiming back towards that middle bit. So let's go back to using those round nose pliers, and you'll see that we get a slightly different feel. When we bring that wire back out and round, you get a much smoother, rounder gap between each of those protrusions or petals if you prefer. So it's all about your choice, what you want to achieve from this design, and it is lovely and versatile to work with. I'm just going to make that slightly narrower because otherwise it will look funny with the rest of them. So I'm going to bring that wire away from the design. I think we're going to end up with 6 petals on this design. So as we get halfway along the wire, what we're going to do is to grip that wire and push the end over slightly so we get that angle in there. Where's CT? I want to say that sounds like it could be Connecticut, but I don't know what any of the abbreviations are, and I'm very sorry for that. Not versed in US state abbreviations. So we've come to the end of that petal. Let's draw that wire across, and you can see again that we're burning through that 18 inches of wire that we started with. When you start to need to, you can just open that out slightly, but it's much easier to control this than to have a great big long strand of wire sticking out into infinity, catching on your keyboard, the cat, the kids, whatever it is you've got hanging around your workspace. So the wire has returned again towards that centre point. It doesn't need to be exactly in the middle. Connecticut, never apologise, Denise. I'm happy with myself that I guessed. Amy says no 2 flowers are alike. Absolutely beautiful soul, just like you and your neighbour. No 2 folks are alike either. So let's bring that wire back out for one last petal. Now, if you didn't like how this had turned out, you can make them slightly narrower. You can make them slightly softer, and I'll show you how to adjust those in just a tick. So let's just push that over ever so slightly. We'll put that last... Oh, my pliers were upside down. Let's put that last little bend in. Bring the wire towards the top and then pop that back through. And you may notice that the last 2 petals, or rather the first and the last petal, have got a little extra space. And that's just because it makes it slightly easier for the next stage of our tutorial today if there's a tiny little extra bit of space in there. So again, you could either use your round nose pliers or you can use your chain nose pliers. I tend to use the bent chain nose pliers because it means I can hold the piece that I'm working on from underneath and you get to see what's happening. If I'm using my chain nose pliers, it means I have to hold them up like this, which is all, I think you can agree, a little bit blurry. So I use my bent chain nose pliers all the time, every day for jewellery making. So I'm going to create that last bend and just push the wire up and away for now. I do want that to be slightly tighter, but not completely closed up. Hello from North Carolina. Love this flower petal design. Thank you, Kathy Ann. That's very kind of you. I appreciate your company. Thank you for hanging out with us at Jessie James Beads. So I've just refined the shape slightly. You can mess around with where that central little circular form sits, but what we're looking to do now is to tie the beginning bit to the end bit. So at the moment, you can absolutely open that out, and that would be a disaster. If that catches on something, it's gone. So let's just unspool a little bit more of that wire. We started, as I said earlier, with 18 inches of 18 gauge. Once you get a handle on the technique, you can up that gauge ever so slightly. If you find it tricky, you can take that down to 20 gauge, but you will need to hammer it if you want to wear it. Let's pop that down on the board for a second whilst I grab a length of that lighter wire. So it's 18 gauge for the flower and your weaving wire is 26 gauge. So I have an offcut here. You genuinely need probably about 8 inches at most. So I'm just going to cut this in half. This is just some that I have on my desk. This is around about 8 or 9 inches of that 26 gauge round wire in a gold colour. Which wire you're using for this design, it really doesn't matter. It could be craft wire, it could be German style, whatever you have available. Let's get on with tying the design neatly together. Now this is a bit of an introduction into wire weaving. Now I spend a lot of my time weaving wire. I truly enjoy it. Oh, I tell you what, before we move on, I was going to show you how you can make little adjustments onto these petals, didn't I? I did say that I would, so let's do that. If you wanted to slightly soften these sharp angles, let's say you've made your flower and you think, actually, I prefer the slightly softer look, you can re-soften those by gently squishing either side. I'm pressing down on the centerpiece. What will happen is that the flower will slightly open out, and I'll show you how to fix that in a second. But let's just say that we preferred the softer aspect. You can absolutely leave it with those sharper angles, but let's say you wanted the slightly softer aspect. I'm just very, very softly pressing my pliers on those angles, and you'll see that the flower opens up, which is kind of funny, but it does look kind of different when you've softened those angles. So it's really whichever one you prefer. Cherie says, oh, Jem, this looks like a clematis. Can you imagine doing this in purple with a golden centre? That would be absolutely magnificent. If you do make that, don't forget to tag us on social media. If you put hashtag JJB, there's another hashtag, but I don't know what it is because I'm useless. That would be fabulous though. So in order to close this back up and make that little section in the middle all nice and tight, you'll just need to kind of push those two soft little centre sections together. And the cheatiest, quickest way of doing this is to take one of these little soft U shapes, draw it over the top of the other one and allow it to spring back out. So you can see how that tightens it up. I'm taking this U shape and putting it very gently over the top of the next one. When it springs back, it springs just so that it sits next to it. So it's a bit of a cheat thing, but I want to give you the benefit of my years of messing things up. So we've just tightened that back up. Now what you will also notice is that my flower petals are no longer separated at exactly equal intervals. That's fine. We're not going to worry about it. We're going to pull that central strand with the remainder of the wire on it just a little bit away, and then what we're going to do is open the distance between each of those petals so that the flower then becomes symmetrical again. And if you're very gentle doing all this, your flower will survive the indignity of you changing your mind with what you want to do with it. Another thing that you can do with your flower design is add an almost 3D element to it. Now, if you're going to use Cherie's idea of a clematis, or if you prefer clematis, I don't know how it's pronounced in the States. I call it a clematis. My mother calls it a clematis. I have no idea. What we're going to do is put a little bit of a bend on the end of each petal going downwards, and then further along towards the tip, upwards. So about 2/3 of the way along, we press the wire down, and then at the very, very end, we bring that up. And what we're doing is adding interest, detail, and believe it or not, we're adding hardness to our design. By just very, very small, gentle movements, we can work hard on our design. And this is actually a design that I made as a clematis a few years ago. So good eye there, my lovely. You can bring that wire down about 2/3 of the way, and at the very, very tip, tilt those pliers back up. If I show you that sideways, you'll see that we've got a nice little deviation in the flower, and it just gives it so much more glitter because you've got different angles of wire facing the eye of the beholder now, which means that it's much more eye-catching, which is a win. So let's find that scrap of 26 gauge wire. What I will do is I will rotate this wire about 3 or 4 times around this central core. Now, if you want to do that up here a bit because it's easier, that's absolutely fine. All you need to think about is that the cut end is going to work its way down towards the flower. So I've put about 1 inch of the end of the wire over the top, and I'm just going to rotate that around, and I've decided that however many rotations that does is what I'm going to use. Now, if you get stabbed in the finger, you can, instead of getting stabbed in the finger, just use your pliers to rotate that end section around. I'm just going to move it along so I don't catch the flower. So taking the pliers and softly rotating them will mean that you're doing the job that your fingertips didn't really want to get involved with. So we have now a little coil, and I'm just tightening that up very, very gently and softly, of that golden finer gauge wire sitting over the top of the core wire. How do you sharpen the angles? Question, question, question. The angles on the tips of the flower. If you wanted to have sharper angles on the tips of the flower, you can pinch. Let's do that first, and if that's the wrong answer, then I'm very sorry. You'll have to enlighten me how I can help you better. So just pinching the whole assembly, and then very, very gently. I'm using gold wire today, Anne. Can you tell I'm so happy to be able to garden again? Yes, absolutely. So we've put some nice sharp ends on the flower, which again has changed the shape. So that's something else to work with. Let's just open that one out a bit. It's a bit too narrow for me now. I quite like how that looks. It's a bit more like a passiflora now. So we've got our coil of wire, finer gauge wire, and we're going to zip line that down, whoop, so that it sits against that central section where we started a few minutes ago. Now, in order to bring the last petal into contact with the first petal, I'm going to draw these 2 top petals slightly closer together, and I'm going to take the tip of the wire down inside the first petal shape that we made. So this is the last petal shape just here, which has got the bend, and then the wire comes away, the core wire comes up here. So I'm going to encircle the core wire and the outside of our first petal shape that we made. So if I pop the tip of the wire down inside and draw that all the way through and pull that firmly without unspooling my lovely little coil of wire. Maria says, beautiful flowers, loving them. Thank you so very much. We need to have the outside of the first petal adjacent to but not crushed up against that core wire, because we're going to go for 1 wrap around both the core and the outside of the petal, and then we're going to go for 3 wraps, 1 and 2 and 3 wraps around the core wire. Then I'm going to scooch that all the way down. So you can see we're tying the end section to the beginning section. So I've gone for 3 wraps around just the core wire, bring the tail down inside that first petal, quite springy wire I'm using today. So let's just draw that all the way through. Little bit of tension, but not so tight that you can't then get the wire down between. Can you see where the wire is going? It's between the core wire and the outside of the petal. So that's 1 wrap, 2 wraps and 3 wraps. Scooch those wires down. Was that only 1 through the first petal? Yes. Now I'm going for a bit of, let's just give that a quick squish. There we go. So I went for a number of wraps at the beginning of the core wire, but now I've moved on to one of my favourite weaves, which is a 3 and 1 weave. So I've gone for 3 wraps around just the core wire, and then take the tip of the wire down inside the first petal, pull that all the way through, and then I've got 1 wrap around both of the things I'm tying together. Now I've only got 3 wraps that go inside that petal, which is absolutely fine. It's more than enough to create the strength that we're looking for. What I want to do now is to have enough rotations around the core wire so that the top of the coil sits between these 2 upper petals. Now it's boring to do it slowly, but it does mean that it's super neat and tidy. What I tend to do is, I've done 4 wraps there, I'm going to compress. So I'll go for another 4 wraps and then I'll compress again. Whoops, whacked the camera. So if you do all of your wrapping in one go and then try and compress it, it's like a spring. It doesn't really want to be compressed. So I do a couple at a time. It could be 3, it could be 4. 1, 2, 3 and 4. We've still got plenty of that scrap wire left over. Compress, and I think we'll go for another 4 wraps, and then I will trim this tail away. So I've decided that this is the front, for no other reason than that the flower comes forward slightly and then backwards, and then the tip comes forwards. It just looks pretty, whichever side you prefer. So I'm looking at the back of my design now. Patience is important with wire. Amy, you are so correct. The more time you give it and the more kindness you show yourself, the better your wire designs will be. Getting frustrated and angry because it's not coming together quickly, doesn't look like somebody else's, it's not the way to go. So this looks a little bit more like a passiflora flower than a clematis at the moment. I'm going to show you another way that you can adjust the form as you go through. Now if you remember, I used the round nose pliers to make some of these little gaps, and I used the chain nose pliers to make others. I've decided that I want them to be a little bit tighter, so I'm just going to very gently pinch those up. And then you can adjust those petals to your desires. If you decide that you want those petals to be ever so slightly broader, I'm going to use my pliers like reverse action pliers. I'm putting the tips inside the petal. Let me just show you that again. Let's choose one that's further away. There we go. So you can see the petal. Put the tips of my pliers up inside. If you have reverse action circlip pliers, brilliant. If you don't, then you can use your standard pliers. I'm going to grip the petal, and can you see how I'm using one finger to just open up? This is what I'm doing with the pliers. They're sitting between the wires, and I'm going to open them up slightly. And in that way, if you decide that you wanted broader petals, you wish you'd never squished them, you can do that. It's a really versatile design. What you might find is that you need to just recite that central section again, like so, and you can just push those, tighten up those central pieces if you need to. When you're pinching wires together, it does pay to mind your fingertips. I have had very nasty bruises from doing what I've just shown you, so just take your time. So you can play around with the flower design a little bit until it looks exactly how you want it to. Overall, I'm quite happy with how this is looking. Now I have quite a lot of wire left available to me up here. So what I'm going to do is trim this probably to around about 5 or 6 inches. So I've still got a couple of inches of wire. I could probably make another design with that later. I've got about 5 inches sticking out up at the top here, and we're now going to decide what kind of bead order we want to use. I just realised I should probably have another bead in here. Let's pick one. Here he is. A little faceted one, I think. It's a beautiful collection. I adore these. Shall I make it with this one instead? Which one do you want? Facet or metallic? Faceted bead or metallic bead in this design? And we'll add some bead caps, and we'll add some beautiful faceted rondelle spaces either side. Beautiful, says Margaret. Thank you, my lovely. You're very, very kind. As always, your support is hugely appreciated. The strand that we're working with right now is called Beach Chic. And it does have golden sand tones. Anne got in there first and she has suggested faceted. Margaret indeed agrees, which is good news. Both on board with the same design aesthetic. So you can play around with however you want your designs to work. You can play around with your bead orders. Cherie, my darling, I'm so sorry you have been outvoted. We've gone for the faceted. Let's put this metallic one over. I'm going to make earrings with that later, I think. It's beautiful. So like I say, you can play around with whatever bead order you want in your designs. There were more votes for faceted, so that's what we're going to use. I am going to add in one of the small faceted rondelles. It's quite chubby for a rondelle. And then we're going to use a bead cap. The large faceted, I think it's a perfect round. It's like a glitter ball. It's fabulous. Followed by another bead cap and another vote for faceted. I'm glad because it's on the strand. And then topping that off with another faceted rondelle. So as I said before, you can play around with this to your heart's content. If you decide that you want slightly more symmetry, what we can do before we go any further is just push that right hand petal up and then respace the other petals. It's a super versatile design that you really can play with, and if you warm that wire through very, very nicely before you begin, it's going to be really easy to make all these modifications. Thank you, Mary, says Beautiful Flower. I appreciate it. Cherie says it will be lovely. Thank you, my lovely. Debbie says, hi, just joining. Sorry I'm late. Have I missed much? Darling, what you can do is watch on the recap, the replay. The video will be available on the Facebook page very, very soon, and at some point it will probably be uploaded to YouTube. Thank you for joining us, my darling. Maria says, perfect with the caps. I really like it. So you can join in on the replay or over on the blog or on YouTube. I'm going to tighten up this little angle that I made with the round nose pliers. It's too wide. So let's give that a teeny tiny squish. Squish from underneath with those tips of the pliers, and you'll notice that I'm not putting those onto my finger. I have done this kind of injury before and it's not fun, so just mind out, my loves. So there you go. You can play around with just tightening up those angles however you desire. Let's just give that one a squish as well. And then you can work out where you want things to sit best. It's very, very versatile and very good natured as well. So although it looks like a complicated design, have a practice, get your scrap wires out, practice making the petals, even if you only do 2, and then you pop it into the big receptacle on the floor marked experience. It's all about learning as we go, teaching ourselves, understanding wire better. So all we have to do now is create a wrapped loop up at the top. I've shown you these 1,000 times, well, maybe not 1,000 times, but you get the point. So I'm going to pop the pliers across in the same orientation as the desk and bring the remainder of that wire forwards. If you don't have bail makers, you can use a pencil or something similar. I tend to make quite oversized bails because I enjoy wearing chunky chains. Also, it means that you can wear, let me just grab one. You can use oversized bails with our fantastic chain reaction chains. Some of them have got stations on them that are quite large. So one of the things you can do is to have 2 short lengths of chain reaction with a parrot or a lobster clasp on either end, and then you can kind of join it in the middle, or you can make a super sized bail, and in that way it will fit on most chains. Beautiful, beautiful, just beautiful. Thank you so much, my darlings. You're very, very kind. So I'm going to use my number 6 on the bail maker. Amy says they go over clasps as well. Absolutely. Let me show you the giant clasp I have. Oh, I've lost it. Where is it? Here it is. Yes. If you're using a clasp like this, you'll need a giant one. You will indeed. Phew, says Anne. I'm not the only one who's pinched themselves with pliers. No, my darling, many, many times. Great idea, thanks. Wonderful, my darlings. A beautiful pendant, says Anne. Thank you kindly. So I'm going to rotate halfway around that round form. I tend to do my wrapped loops in 2 stages. It makes it easier to teach. So I've got that first loop shape going, and I'm going to draw that tail all the way around whatever round form I'm using. Now, like I said before, it could be a pen. I have had this marker pen for about 9 years. I used to work on a TV channel where we weren't allowed to show brand names, so hence that's why it says a marker pen on it. I find it quite funny that it still works. So we've got that little flower. You can see it's sitting in a little bit more 3D. If you want to, you can just play around with that slightly, get that central loop to sit more in the middle. You've got lots of opportunities to play with that. So we've got our loop shape up at the top here. I'm going to support across the loop without squishing anywhere the wire crosses over, and then what we're going to do is to take that tail all the way around. Now this is why it's key to warm your wire through. When your 18 gauge copper core wire is toasty warm like this, it will coil beautifully for you. When it's cold and angry and upset, it will be gappy and there will be uneven wraps. So as I mentioned to you before, I decided that this was the back and that this was the front, which means I want to trim that wire at the rear, get those flush cutters as close as I possibly can to that core that we created, and I'm just going to now very, very carefully, being super mindful of my faceted bead, I'm just going to squish that last little bit down against the core wire itself. Just very, very gently turning those pliers to make sure that the end bit doesn't stick up. And in that way, we've created 2 pendants from our beautiful Beach Chic strand. We've got so many more beads to use. It's feisty, that one. Including this utterly spectacular glass bead. I don't know if you can see, but the golden stripes are really, really glittery. It's beautiful. And then we've got these fabulous metallics. You've got different size and colourways to work with, but very definitely a beachy goddess vibe to this one. I quite feel like getting into a toga and wearing jewellery like this. So that's your Beach Chic strand. 2 pendants made in exactly the same way, looking really quite differently. Oh, Amy is agreeing with me. Love the diversity of the same basic design. Absolutely. So my name is Jem. I'm here at Jessie James Beads to teach you all things wire. I hope that you've enjoyed that. If you have a little bit of scrap wire available to you, don't know if you can see in there, but there's lots of little offcuts. It's always really handy to practice your wire wrapping. So we did a very, very limited amount of wrapping just at the top centre there, where we wrapped the first petal together with the last section of the design, and that's for security. The pendant now won't come undone. It's all kind of connected if you follow my logic. So a little bit of light wrapping there, and that was a 3-and-1 design. Very, very basically, you wrap 3 times around the one wire. When you add the second wire in, you're going to wrap once around both of them. And there's so many variations. So you can switch. So you can wrap 3 times here, once around both, and then 3 times around the top wire. So much fun to be had just with a bit of scrap wire. We've got some little angry offcuts of 26 gauge. It's a little bit too tense to do much useful with. Absolutely fantastic rather, for practicing your wire wrapping and your wire weaving. My name is Jem. It's been my absolute pleasure to be with you today. It's Thursday, the 18th of May. If you've joined me on the live, thank you so much. If you're watching on the repeat, welcome to Jessie James Beads. I hope that you've had a beautiful day, and I look forward to seeing you back again very, very soon. Mwah! Bye for now.